you write a scene when you don't really remember what happened? The answer to this question coming up. So a lot of my students tell me, well, Wendy, I want to write a scene, but I just don't remember what happened. So what can you do about that? Well, your first instinct might be to simply leave the scene out of your book. But let me tell you why that is not really a good option. First of all, anytime you mention something happening in your book, your reader wants to live through that event in the form of a scene. In other words, you don't want to do something like this. That was the day Hakeem and I broke up. 2 days later, I was feeling better. And a week later, I went for an interview at a new job. Wait, you and Hakeem broke up? If you just mention this in passing, your reader feels left out of the story. So it also gives the sensation of your story moving along too quickly. As a reader, I'm getting this information, but I'm not really enjoying it. So here's a really important rule to keep in mind. Anytime something happens in your book, you need to include a scene. All right, let me give you another example. My mother came to visit and we got into a huge fight over Soren's education. Later that week, she called and we reconciled. So in this example, we actually have two different events, which means you actually need two different scenes. You need a scene of the fight and you need a scene about making up with your mother. And if you don't give me those two scenes, your reader is going to feel left out of this story. So when something happens in your book, you want to let your reader live through that event in the form of a scene. Otherwise, you'll create the sensation that you're not really giving us the full story. Your scenes are where a reader is transported, where they feel like they become part of the story. They actually become you. They forget they're reading a book and they become part of the story. And that's exactly what you want to do. So anytime something happens in your book, your reader wants to live through that event in the form of a scene, which brings me back to my original question. But what if you don't really remember? So there's actually a really easy solution to this, but most people miss out on the solution because they're thinking of their scenes in the wrong way. They think that a scene is there to recount everything that happened. So let me tell you the wrong way to think about a scene. So if you're writing about your quinceañera, the wrong way to write about the scene is to write about everything that happened, to write about having your hair fixed by your father, then dancing with the cute boy from third period, then posing for uncomfortable photos, finally looking at your bouquet while hanging onto a tree for support. But a scene doesn't exist to recount all of the things that happened. In fact, I suggest you watch my other video, Are You Thinking of Your Scenes in the Right Way? For now, just keep in mind that your scene exists because of an event, because something happens. And it can work really well to cut straight to that event. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's say you want to write a scene about your boyfriend breaking up with you at a party. Beginning writers often feel the need to recount all of the things that happened. You made a toast to the birthday girl. You drank too much champagne. You ate the worst pizza of your life. You overheard two women talking about you. You ran into an old friend from high school. But you just don't need all of that information in your scene. I don't need to live through the entire party with you. I just need to live through the moment when you get broken up with. Let me give you an example of how you might write this scene, cutting straight to the main event. It was at Jessica's party that Hakeem decided to break up with me. 1 minute I was sipping on a margarita. The next I was staring at Hakeem dumbfounded, trying to take in what he had just said. I repeated his words back to him. You're moving to Mauritania and you don't want a long distance relationship? Apparently, along with his new job, he was starting a new life, one that would not include me. So that's all you need. I lived through this moment with you because you gave me a scene. And it took all of 6 sentences. Now compare this to the original version. That was the day Hakeem and I broke up. 2 days later, I was feeling better. So keep in mind that you can write a scene that cuts straight to the main event. We don't need all of the setup in your scene. I'm going to give you another example in a minute. Before I do, please hit like or subscribe. And if you'd like a free 7-part class on memoir structure, click on the link right below this video. Okay, on to the other example. So this is the kind of writing you don't want to do in your book. My mother came to visit and we got into a huge fight over Soren's education. Later that week, she called and we reconciled. Okay, so that's what you don't want to do, that you're not letting a reader live through the story if you write like this. So how do you actually create a scene if you don't really remember all of the details? You don't remember all of the things you talked about with your mother. Again, you want to cut straight to the main event. This is one way you might create your scene. I'd hoped for a peaceful visit with my mother. However, it only took 2 hours for us to begin fighting. I made the mistake of bragging about Jenna's straight A's, which gave my mother the chance to bring up Soren's education. We hadn't thought much about nursery school. Jim was busy with his new job, and I'd been working on a new oil painting of a baby kangaroo trapped in its pouch, which some might have seen as a metaphor for a daughter's relationship with her mother. But my mom was adamant that we start on the application for Norton Preschool as soon as possible, before the enrollment period closed. All of her friends had kids who had gone there, and apparently those kids were now grown-up somebodies. From her point of view, it was either Norton Preschool or a guaranteed future of life on the streets, of fishing dinner out of grocery store dumpsters. So that's a scene. You let me live through this moment with you. What I want you to notice is there is no description of the furniture in the living room, no description of what anyone is wearing. I intentionally even left all dialogue out of this scene. The most important thing you can add to your scene to make it interesting is subjective writing. And again, I've created another video on this topic. So what do I want you to take away from this video? Number one, anytime you mention an event in your book, you want to include a scene. Number two, scenes are where readers are transported, where they live through an event with the narrator. Number three, your scene doesn't have to be long. Sometimes it's better to get right to the event instead of having a long setup in your scene. I hope this makes your good writing even better. See you next time. Take care, guys.